I was 63 the night I stopped waiting by the kitchen window and started following my husband instead. It began with the chime of a text on my old iPhone, lying beside a bowl of chicken soup gone cold. Working late again. Don't wait up. I'd seen words like that more times than I could count. This time, as I read them, something in me slid from hurt into a quiet, steady anger. For years I had done exactly what those messages told me. I wrapped leftovers, turned off the porch light, told myself he was tired, that long marriages went through phases. I looked away from the new cologne and the late showers. I made jokes at church about being a warehouse widow and laughed with the other ladies so I wouldn't cry. But that evening, with the clock ticking too loud in our small Florida kitchen, a different thought finally surfaced. If he wasn't coming home to me, I was going to find out where he really was. I stood up just to feel my legs under me. Outside, the driveway lamp lit our old Toyota Camry. We'd driven that car through most of our life together. Lately, I'd caught myself thinking that if it could talk, it might know his schedule better than I did. The idea stung more than I wanted to admit. My thumb hovered over our daughter Emily's name. I could already hear her tired voice. The baby fussing in the background. "Mom, you know how his job is. He's doing his best." She didn't need my fears on top of bedtime and bottles. I set the phone down without calling. Instead, I grabbed my sweater and slid my feet into the walking shoes by the door. In the hallway mirror, a woman with gray at her temples and soft lines around her mouth stared back. Her shoulders were a little rounded from years of leaning over sinks and stoves. But her eyes, my eyes, looked sharper than they had in a long time. "You're really gonna do this?" I whispered. The woman in the glass didn't argue. A few minutes later I was in the driver's seat of the Camry, keys trembling in my hand. I turned off the radio. My heartbeat was loud enough. When his truck rolled past our house and turned out of the neighborhood, I waited a breath, then eased out after him, keeping just far enough back that I could see his taillights. The street looked like every other weeknight, porch lights glowing, a dog barking somewhere down the block. But it didn't feel familiar anymore. It felt like I'd stepped off the porch of my old life and was following it down the road, not sure where it would lead. At the first stop sign I could have turned around. The familiar voices rushed in. "You're too old for this. What if you get lost? What if you follow him all over town and he really is just working and you're the jealous old woman with too much time to think?" Then another voice, small but clear, cut through. "And what if you already know he isn't?" His blinker flashed left toward town instead of right toward the warehouse where he was supposed to spend the night. My stomach dropped. I stayed behind, trying to look like any other car and not a wife who'd finally run out of patience. When I hesitated at a yellow light, a pickup honked hard behind me. "Relax," I muttered at the windshield. "First night on duty for your local senior citizen spy." The line was ridiculous enough that a tiny laugh slipped out, surprising me. Fear and humor sat side by side in my chest, like two people sharing a booth who didn't much like each other. Up ahead, his brake lights flared. He turned into a strip of small family restaurants and dim parking lots, nowhere near the road that led to his job. I slowed and followed him in, my hands suddenly cold on the wheel, watching his truck roll into a space under a flickering sign. Whatever I was about to see, one thing was already certain. There was no going back to pretending I didn't see it. I parked the Camry 2 rows behind his truck, far enough that he wouldn't notice me, but close enough to keep him in sight. The parking lot lights flickered the way old Florida street lamps always do, like they're tired from the heat and humidity. My hands were still cold on the steering wheel, though the night was warm. Robert stepped out of his truck, straightened his shirt, and glanced at his reflection in the window. He smoothed his hair, something he never bothered doing when coming home to me. The gesture was small, barely a second, but it felt like someone pushed a thumb into a bruise I didn't know I had. He walked toward one of the small family restaurants. Not fancy, just a place with wooden signs and breakfast specials painted on the window. Nothing about it screamed secret affair. Nothing. Nothing. Yet. I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. At my age, spying required both courage and good bifocals, and unfortunately, I only brought one of those. I tried lowering myself in the seat, which resulted in a ridiculous half-slide that made my knee pop loud enough to scare me. "Great," I whispered. "Stealth mode brought to you by arthritis." I grabbed a half-finished Starbucks cup from the holder and took a sip. It was already watery, but the familiar taste steadied me. Just as I lowered the cup, someone approached Robert. A woman. She wasn't what I expected. Not young, not glamorous, not dressed like someone trying to steal another woman's husband. She looked normal, late 40s maybe. Simple jeans, a cardigan, hair tied back like she came straight from a long shift somewhere. She smiled politely at him, a tired smile, not flirty, not coy, not like in the movies. That somehow hurt worse. Robert opened the restaurant door for her. He hadn't opened a door for me in years. My chest tightened, not with jealousy, but with that familiar sting of being quietly set aside. I slid down lower in my seat, trying to get a better angle. In doing so, I accidentally hit the steering wheel and made the horn let out the tiniest, most embarrassing squeak. The woman turned her head a little. I froze. Absolutely froze. If statues could sweat, they'd look like me in that moment. She didn't see me, thank God. She walked inside after Robert. They sat near the window, the worst possible place for my nerves. I watched them talk. Robert leaned forward, serious, not smiling the way a man would if he were chasing something new. The woman looked worried, nodding slowly, like she wasn't sure she wanted to be there. A tiny spark of hope flared inside me. Maybe this wasn't what I thought it was. Maybe she was a coworker. Maybe they were talking about something I didn't understand. Maybe I was wrong. I clung to that thread like someone holding onto a fraying rope. But as I watched them, the rope thinned. Their faces weren't romantic, but they were familiar. Too familiar for people who had just met. I held my breath and whispered, almost afraid of hearing myself. "What are you doing, Robert? Who is she to you?" The night didn't answer. But something in my heart did. Robert and the woman didn't stay long. Maybe 30 minutes, just enough for my imagination to collapse and rebuild itself a dozen painful ways. When they stepped out of the restaurant, I ducked down so fast my back cracked. "That's great," I whispered. "I came here to find the truth, not throw my spine out." I peered over the dashboard. They weren't holding hands, but they walked side by side with the quiet familiarity of people who didn't need to. She said something. He nodded, a tired nod. The kind of nod he stopped giving me years ago. They got into his truck together. My stomach flipped. No excuses left now. No coworker needing a ride home. No work emergency. Still, I followed. His truck pulled out of the lot. I waited 2 full seconds, then started the Camry. The steering wheel felt slippery, though my palms were dry. Florida nights were always humid, but the air inside the car felt heavier. Like guilt and fear were taking up space on the passenger seat. He drove past the main road and deeper into a quieter part of town. Street lights grew farther apart. Houses shrank into older apartment buildings with peeling paint and sagging stair rails. Finally, he turned into a cramped parking lot and killed the engine. I parked as far away as possible and watched them climb out. They didn't walk like lovers sneaking around. They walked like 2 people sharing a secret too heavy to hold alone. She led the way up an outdoor staircase. He followed, 1 step behind her like a man who knew this path too well. I got out of my car, moving carefully, slowly. My knee popped again, loud enough that I winced and prayed no one heard. "Wonderful," I muttered. Nothing says stealth like aging joints. At the base of the stairs I hesitated. I was 63, in my walking shoes, clutching the railing like someone about to face a doctor with bad news. But I climbed anyway. Halfway up, the motion sensor light flicked on, nearly blinding me. I froze against the wall like some kind of suburban raccoon caught in the act. As I edged closer, I heard voices. Not clear but close enough that each rise and fall twisted inside my chest. "Paperwork needs her signature," Robert's voice said. My breath caught. The woman, her voice softer, answered, "But you said she's gone? You told me your wife moved out months ago?" My knees nearly gave out. I gripped the railing to stay upright. Gone? Moved out? Like I was nothing more than a name he'd erased. Their voices lowered. I leaned in just a little more, just enough that my iPhone slid from my sweater pocket, clacked against the rail, and nearly tumbled down the stairs. I caught it, but not quietly. A door nearby swung open. A man stepped out holding a trash bag, looked straight at me, and blinked. "You lost or something?" he asked. I managed the fakest laugh of my life. Oh no, just stretching my legs. Night walks are good for circulation. At midnight? Yes, I said, nodding too hard. Best air quality. He shrugged and went down the stairs. I waited until he disappeared before pressing myself back against the wall, heart pounding. Through the thin door, I heard one more sentence, Robert's voice, sharp and low. She won't find out. She never pays attention. Something inside me cracked clean in half. I didn't know what hurt more. What I heard, or that he actually believed it. The next morning felt heavier than any morning I could remember. I must have slept an hour at most. When the sun finally reached the kitchen window, it touched everything, my cold coffee mug from last night, the folded dish towel, the empty space at the table where I had once believed my marriage rested safely. I moved like someone twice my age, slow and stiff. My hands shook as I scooped sugar into my coffee, and I spilled half of it across the counter. Normally I'd fuss over the mess. Today I just stared at it, watching the granules sparkle under the light like something pretending to be pretty. Robert walked in a few minutes later, stretching and yawning like a man who'd actually been working all night instead of whispering lies in someone else's apartment. He kissed the air near my cheek, not on it, and said, "Morning. Last night was brutal." I nodded, keeping my back to him. "Long shift?" "You know how it is," he sighed. "They needed me." His shirt smelled faintly of that woman's laundry detergent, clean, crisp, and unfamiliar. I took another sip of coffee so I wouldn't have to answer. We sat across from each other in the quiet, the clink of his spoon against the bowl sounding louder than it had in years. He didn't look at me. He didn't notice my swollen eyes. He didn't ask why I wasn't talking. For a moment, I wondered if he would notice anything at all if I vanished for real. Around mid-morning, my iPhone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Morning, Mom. You doing okay? Need anything?" I typed back, "Just tired. I'll be fine." I deleted the next sentence. "I heard your father say I never pay attention," before I had the courage to send it. After Robert left for another long shift, I stood in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the empty chair where he'd sat just minutes before. The words I overheard last night echoed so loudly it felt like they were bouncing off the cabinets. She won't find out. She never pays attention. My hands curled into fists. I had spent 40 years paying attention, to him, to our family, to our life. And the one time I needed him to look back at me, he was busy building an entirely different life somewhere else. Something inside me snapped into place. I grabbed my purse, my car keys, and tied my hair back. I meant to use hair mousse, but in my rush I grabbed Robert's styling gel instead. My bangs stuck up just enough to make me look like a startled bird. I caught my reflection in the microwave door and groaned. Perfect. Exactly the look a woman needs for confronting the truth. I stopped at a Starbucks on the way, more out of habit than hunger. The barista handed me a cup with my name spelled wrong, Margaret, and for a moment that tiny mistake felt oddly comforting. At least someone wasn't pretending to know me. The drive to the apartment complex felt shorter in daylight. I parked the Camry and sat there for a long breath, staring at the staircase I had hid under just hours before. My legs felt shaky, but my resolve didn't. I walked up the steps one by one, gripping the railing, the Florida sun glinting harshly off the metal. At apartment 2B, I lifted my hand, and with a heart that felt too old for this and too young to give up, I knocked. The woman who opened the door looked even more tired in daylight. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and she wore a faded t-shirt that had seen better years. When she saw me, confusion crossed her face first, then caution. "Yes?" she asked. I swallowed, my hands trembling just enough that I tightened my grip on the Starbucks cup I was still holding. "My name is Margaret," I said quietly. "I'm Robert's wife." Her eyes widened. If shock has a sound, it was the soft gasp she let out. She pressed a hand to her mouth and took a step back as if the floor beneath her shifted. He told me he was divorced," she whispered. "He said you moved out 2 years ago." "Well," I said, forcing a bitter smile, "I must be haunting the house then." She stood frozen for a long second before stepping aside. "Please, come in." The apartment was small, lived in, cluttered in the way homes get when people work too much and sleep too little. A baby bottle warmer sat on the counter, a laundry basket overflowed near the sofa. Life was happening here, not luxury, not romance. Just life. I took a seat on the worn couch, still gripping my cup. My bangs, stiff from Robert's gel, stood slightly askew. I tried smoothing them down, but they popped right back up like they'd made peace with chaos. The woman noticed and blurted, "Do you want milk? Water? I can warm something." She reached for a bottle on the counter, realized it was a baby bottle, and froze. "Oh God, sorry, not for guests or adults." Despite the storm in my chest, I let out a soft laugh. "Don't worry, at my age I'd probably fall asleep the moment I drink warm milk anyway." She sat across from me, hands twisting in her lap. "My name is Denise," she said quietly, "and I didn't know about any of this, I swear." I studied her face. There was no triumph in her eyes, no pride, no gloating, just exhaustion and guilt. "What exactly?" I asked. "Did he tell you about me?" She reached for her phone, an older iPhone with a cracked corner, and pulled up a series of messages. She turned the screen toward me. In Robert's words, I was emotionally unstable, barely home, refusing to sign divorce papers, and holding the house hostage out of spite. My throat tightened. I looked down at my hands that had folded his laundry, pressed dinner onto plates he'd barely thanked me for, held a life together he'd already rewritten. "He used my name," I said softly, "on paperwork you signed with him." Denise's face crumpled. "He told me it was for a business loan. He said he needed someone trustworthy to co-sign because his ex," she winced, "because you ruined his credit." I felt something inside me tilt. "My credit is fine," I said. "Or, it was." Without a word, Denise got up, walked to a drawer, and returned with a thin folder. She handed it to me like someone handing over the last piece of a long, terrible puzzle. Inside were photocopies of several documents, ones with my name printed neatly at the top and a shaky, unfamiliar scrawl where my signature should have been. My breath hitched. "This isn't me." "I know," Denise whispered. "I didn't realize it until last week. But after seeing you here." She shook her head. "Robert lied to both of us. And he used you to get money he never told me the truth about." Silence stretched between us, thick and painful. But for the first time since last night, I didn't feel alone in it. Denise looked at me, eyes glossy with shame. "If you want the truth, I'll help you, whatever you need." I sat back, the folder on my lap, the weight of betrayal and unexpected alliance settling around me. "Then I said softly, "we start by telling each other everything." Denise sat beside me on the worn couch, her knee bouncing, the folder of photocopied documents resting on my lap like a stone. My fingertips brushed the forged signature again and again, as if touching it could make sense of how my husband's handwriting had twisted itself into something pretending to be mine. "I'm so sorry," Denise whispered. "If I had known." "You didn't," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "He made sure none of us did." She nodded, swallowing hard. "These loans, the amounts aren't small, Margaret. If they're tied to your name." My stomach clenched. "I need to know how bad this is." Denise took a breath, then said the sentence that pushed us both to our feet. "We should go to the bank." The bank was quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear every pen click and every uncomfortable sigh. A young woman with a neat ponytail greeted us, her smile polite but slightly suspicious. The same smile doctors give when they're not sure if you're exaggerating symptoms. "How can I help you today?" she asked. I opened the folder and slid one of the documents across the desk. "I didn't sign this, but it has my name on it." She studied it carefully. Then she looked at me. "Do you have your ID, ma'am?" I handed over my driver's license with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. She didn't miss it. She gave me the kind look people reserve for elderly shoppers who drop coupons. Her eyes moved from the ID to the document, back to me, then to the signature. She frowned. "This doesn't look like the same handwriting." Denise let out a breath so loud she startled herself. "Thank God," she muttered, then immediately corrected. "I mean, thank goodness. Sorry. It's been a long day." The banker typed something into her computer. I watched the reflection of my anxious face in the glossy screen. Behind me, a man in flip-flops filled out a deposit slip like it was the simplest thing in the world. Meanwhile, my own world was cracking open. "We have several accounts and loan applications linked to this profile," the banker said slowly. "Some were submitted in person, some digitally." "Digitally," I whispered. "I don't even know how to sign PDFs. I still print recipes." Denise touched my arm gently. "Let her finish." The banker glanced around, lowered her voice and leaned slightly forward. Mrs. Hayes, based on what I'm seeing, there are inconsistencies that could indicate fraud. Identity fraud. The words hung in the air like smoke. Fraud. My husband. I felt the room tilt a little. My elbow bumped the banker's pen and the cap popped off, shooting across the desk like a tiny rocket. Denise lunged for it, knocking over the small bottle of hand sanitizer. The banker blinked, unsure if she should continue or offer us emotional support and disinfectant. I'm sorry, I said. It's been a confusing few days. The banker softened. I understand. We may need to file an internal review, and you may want to speak with the police. Denise and I exchanged a glance. A long, heavy, shared understanding kind of glance. He told me you were gone, Denise whispered. He told me you ruined his credit, I whispered back. The banker cleared her throat. If someone forged your signature, Mrs. Hayes, it's serious. Serious. As if I hadn't already felt that in my bones. I steadied myself, exhaled slowly, and said the words that surprised even me. What do we need to do next? The police station looked exactly the way every police station looks in small Florida towns. Tired walls, posters curling at the edges, chairs that had given up cushioning years ago. A coffee machine burbled in the corner, filling the air with the smell of burnt beans and despair. Denise and I stood at the front desk, the folder of forged documents tucked under my arm. My legs shook so badly, I had to brace myself against the counter. I couldn't tell if it was humiliation, fear, or simple exhaustion. A middle-aged officer with kind eyes approached us. "Ma'am, how can we help you today?" I opened my mouth, but the words tangled. Denise nudged me gently. "Just start at the beginning," she whispered. I took a breath that felt too big for my chest. "My husband may have forged my signature," I said softly, "and used my name to take out several loans." The officer blinked, then straightened. "All right, let's take a look." We followed him into a small interview room. I accidentally sat in the wrong chair, the one clearly marked processing interview only, and he gently said, "Ma'am, that one's reserved." I scrambled up so fast I nearly knocked my iPhone off the table. Denise caught it, barely. "Great start." The officer studied each document carefully. His expression shifted from neutral to troubled. "And you're saying this isn't your signature?" he asked. "No," I said. "I sign my name the same way I've signed school permission slips, checks, and Christmas cards for 40 years. That," I pointed, "isn't me." He nodded slowly. "And your husband submitted these?" "Yes," I whispered. Saying it aloud felt like ripping a bandage off a wound that hadn't even started to scab. Denise leaned forward. "He lied to both of us. He told me he was divorced. He used Margaret's name on paperwork. He borrowed money I thought was for a business he never even owned. I didn't know." The officer wrote everything down. "What's his name?" "Robert Hayes," I answered. Denise, still flustered, added, H-E, sorry, my brain's fried." "Hayes," I repeated gently. The officer looked up from his notes. "We'll need to file a report. We'll also contact the Financial Crimes Unit. If the loans were taken out using forged signatures, that's not just a family issue. That's a felony." The word hit me harder than I expected. Felony. Robert, prison. Consequences. I squeezed my hands together until my knuckles whitened. "Ma'am," the officer said softly, "I know this is difficult, but you did the right thing coming in. Financial abuse happens more than people realize." Financial abuse. No one had ever put those words next to my marriage before. He asked for my ID, took photos of the documents with his department-issued iPhone, and had me sign a statement. My signature, my real one, looked steady on the page even though my heart wasn't. When everything was done, he said, "We'll contact you once the investigation begins." Denise reached for my hand as we walked out of the station. I let her hold it. For the first time since last night, the air felt breathable again. Outside, the Florida sun hit my face. I leaned against the Camry, exhaling everything I'd been carrying. Then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice, tight, urgent, said, "Mrs. Hayes? You need to know something about your husband. Please call me back, it's important." The line went dead. The unknown number called again, just as Denise pulled out of the parking lot. I pressed the phone to my ear, expecting another piece of my life to fall apart. "Mrs. Hayes? This is Rachel. Rachel Porter. I used to work with your husband. Please, can we meet? There's something you need to know." Her voice trembled. The kind of tremble people get when they've been holding a secret too long. I hesitated only a moment. Where are you? Harbor Square, she said. Suite 214. I'll wait. Harbor Square was a faded business plaza near the highway, the kind of place where offices shared walls with tax prep services and discount nail salons. I parked the Camry near an Amazon box someone had abandoned by the stairs. Suite 214 was on the second floor. Naturally, I walked into the wrong room first. A dozen women in yoga pants turned to stare at me while an instructor in a soft voice said, "Welcome, love. Grab a mat." "Oh no, thank you," I sputtered. "I don't bend like that anymore." I backed out so quickly my shoe squeaked. When I finally found 214, a woman in her late 30s waved me in. Her eyes were tired, her blazer slightly wrinkled, as if she'd been pacing for hours. "You're Margaret," she said softly. "I'm so sorry to call you like this." "People keep saying that this week," I murmured. "And yet, here we are." She tried to smile but couldn't. Instead, she motioned toward a low office chair. When I sat, it sank so deep I nearly disappeared into it. "Well," I said, adjusting myself, "at least gravity still finds me attractive." Rachel let out a tiny laugh before her face turned solemn again. "I didn't know how else to reach you. I didn't know if you were safe." "Safe?" I repeated. "From what?" She pulled out a folder. Thin, overstuffed, worn on the edges. The same kind of folder Denise had shown me, except this one held even more. "Your husband," she began carefully, "has been under internal review at my firm for 6 months. We suspected he was forging signatures. Not just yours." My fingers froze on my lap. "He used the names of elderly clients," she continued, "people who trusted him. People who didn't know what they were signing. He took out lines of credit, moved money between accounts, created fake expenses." Her words felt like pebbles hitting glass, small but enough to crack everything inside me. "And me?" I asked, voice thin. "What did he do with my name?" Rachel slid a page toward me. My name was at the top, my date of birth. And another forged signature, better than the others, almost practiced. "He used you," she whispered, "to secure the biggest loan, the one he couldn't get approved under his own credit." My breath caught. "But why didn't anyone contact me?" "He changed the mailing address," she said. "And the phone number. Everything led back to him." The room blurred for a moment. I blinked until the shapes settled again. Rachel leaned forward. "The investigators reached out to him last week. He didn't show up. Yesterday he cleaned out his office. That's why I called, because if he's involving you, they're going to contact you next." I sat back slowly, the chair swallowing me like a soft trap. My hands felt cold, even in the warm Florida air drifting through the open window. Rachel hesitated before adding, "Mrs. Hayes, I don't think he's coming back to either of us. And whatever he's running from, it's big." I nodded, though my throat felt too tight for words. The truth wasn't just ugly. It was dangerous. By the time I drove home from Harbor Square, the sun had dipped low enough to paint the Florida sky in streaks of orange and violet. Beautiful colors for such an ugly night. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire drive, and when I parked the Camry, I sat for a full minute before I could breathe normally again. The house felt hollow when I walked in, like someone had scooped out its insides. I flipped on the porch light, hung my sweater over the chair, and pressed my fingers to the bridge of my nose. 40 years of marriage, and now all I had were photocopies of crimes and the echo of a stranger's warning. My iPhone buzzed. "Mrs. Hayes," a calm voice said, "this is Detective Lopez. We need you to stay somewhere safe tonight. We've issued a warrant for your husband's arrest." My heart dropped. "For what charges?" "Multiple counts of fraud, possibly identity theft. We'll need to." A sound cut him off. The click of my back door. Slow. Intentional. "Detective," I whispered, "I think he's here." "Do not approach him. We're sending units now. Stay on the line." But before I could respond, Robert stepped into the kitchen. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. He wasn't the man I loved, he wasn't even the man who lied. He was someone running from everything catching up to him. "You talked to them?" he hissed. "You went and opened your mouth." "Robert," my voice trembled, but I didn't step back. "They found the documents. They found my name. You can't keep running." He scoffed. "You ruined everything. Everything I built, everything I worked for." "You mean everything you stole?" I shot back. He moved toward me, not fast, but with a kind of desperate heat that made my palms sweat. "I needed those loans. I needed money. You never understood what pressure I was under. I understood, I said quietly. I understood so much I spent half my life trying to hold us together. His jaw clenched. Give me the paperwork. All of it. I need it before. A sudden crash interrupted him. Robert had tried to climb toward the back window, maybe to escape before police arrived, but his jacket caught on the metal edge of my potted fern shelf. The whole thing wobbled until the fern toppled onto his shoulder, spilling dirt everywhere. He cursed, flailing. Even through my fear, something in me snapped, maybe hysteria, maybe humor. If you fall, I said tightly, call your own insurance. I'm not lifting you. He froze, stunned. Maybe by my tone. Maybe by the fact that I wasn't afraid of him anymore. A second later, blue and red lights flashed through the window. Doors slammed, voices shouted. Robert Hayes, step away from the window. Robert tried to run, of course he did, but gravity had other plans. His sleeve tore loose, he stumbled backward, and 2 officers tackled him before he made it 3 steps. He twisted once, eyes locking on mine. Anger, betrayal, something darker. You did this to me, he spat. No, I whispered, voice steady now. You did this to yourself. They dragged him out the front door. The porch light illuminated his face as they cuffed him beside the Camry. I didn't feel triumph, just a long, aching exhale. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of losing him, because I had already lost him long ago. The days after Robert's arrest moved slowly, like time itself was taking careful steps around my life. Detectives called, bank representatives called, lawyers called. My iPhone buzzed so often it felt like a second heartbeat. But every time they spoke to me, the words grew clearer. You're not responsible for any of this, Mrs. Hayes. You were a victim of his actions. We'll clear your name from all accounts. I had spent months feeling invisible, yet now strangers fought to restore parts of my life my husband had tried to erase. The court hearings were difficult. Seeing Robert in that orange jumpsuit was like looking at a memory gone rotten. He avoided my eyes every time. Maybe shame, maybe anger, maybe both. When the judge announced that his assets gained through fraud would be seized and restitution would be paid to every person he'd hurt, including me, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I simply closed my eyes and breathed. It wasn't victory. It was closure. Emily came over the day after the sentencing. The moment she stepped into the kitchen, she wrapped her arms around me so tightly my bones creaked. Mom, she whispered, you didn't deserve any of this. I pressed my face to her shoulder, letting myself lean on her the way I hadn't leaned on anyone in years. I'm okay, I murmured, or I will be. Later, I tried making pancakes for us. I burned the first batch so badly Emily stood back and said, Mom, should I call the fire department just in case? Her teasing laugh filled the kitchen in a way joy hadn't filled it for a long time. Weeks passed. The silence in the house changed, from lonely to peaceful. I donated Robert's clothes, cleaned out drawers, found old photos of us at the beach and placed them in a box labeled before. Sometimes healing means letting old ghosts sit quietly in the attic. One morning, I sat on the porch with my Kindle, reading a book Emily recommended. The camellias swayed in the Florida breeze. A neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel like the world was ending. A delivery truck left an Amazon package at my door, dish towels I'd forgotten I ordered. Life continued, in its soft, ordinary way. I started a small routine. Morning walks, simple meals, gentle stretches. I tried a beginner yoga video once, but positioned myself the wrong way, and spent 10 minutes staring at the wall instead of the instructor. When I realized, I laughed so hard, I had to sit down. 40 years of marriage had shaped me, but they didn't define the rest of my life. One afternoon, Denise came by. She looked tired but lighter, the way people look after setting a heavy suitcase down. We made it through, she said softly. We did, I replied. We sat on the porch with iced tea, not saying much, just sharing the quiet. 2 women who had survived the same storm, now sitting in the sun. When she left, I watched the sunset, soft gold melting into pink. My house didn't feel empty anymore, just open. My iPhone buzzed. A message from Emily. Mom, how about dinner this weekend? Just us girls, I smiled. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something waiting for me. Spring arrived quietly in Florida that year, the kind of soft warmth that feels like an apology after a long winter. I noticed it first on my morning walks, tiny flowers pushing through the cracks in the sidewalk, the air smelling a little sweeter than it did the week before. One morning, as I walked past the old oak trees lining our street, I realized something unexpected. My steps were lighter. Not because life was suddenly perfect, it wasn't. 40 years of memories don't vanish, even when the person behind them is gone. But the weight on my chest, the one that had followed me for months, no longer pressed quite so hard. Emily and I spent more time together. Sometimes she came over with the baby, filling the house with giggles and half-chewed crackers. Sometimes we sat on the porch drinking iced tea while she told me about work, stopping every few minutes to say, "Mom, you okay?" And I would smile and say, "More than you think." I even started attending a gentle yoga class at the community center. The instructor kept telling us to face the sun, and on my first try I accidentally faced the door instead. Everyone laughed, including me. It felt good, like proof that joy hadn't left my life, only gotten a little lost. Denise visited now and then. We weren't bound by pain anymore, but by something steadier, respect, and the strange comfort of knowing we survived the same betrayal. She brought plants she'd rescued from clearance sales, and we'd repot them together on my porch like two women starting over in the dirt and sunshine. Some evenings, when the sky turned lavender, I'd sit alone with my Kindle and listen to the wind rustle the camellias. And instead of wondering why Robert did what he did, I'd find myself whispering something softer. "I'm still here. I'm still standing." And for the first time in decades, that felt like enough.